I can tell Sean is a serious um, esports racer there with the fancy wheel.
Mm,
I got the Logitech, and it's working out fine for me. But I've been watching all these videos, and I'm like, I gotta spend thousands of dollars and upgrade my sim racing experience.
you don't have to. You
Right.
really don't have to. Like I've been involved in simulation professionally for the better part of 2 decades now, and really, what this does over and above the Logitech that you have, it's just another level of immersion. It's not making me or anyone else any faster or slower, really. It will
Hmm.
make you more consistent.
Hmm.
And it will also up the level of immersion that you feel for actually being in the vehicle that you're in. Like
Right.
this direct drive wheel it's astounding at what it does. Do I need it? No. Does anyone need it? Not really. You don't need it. Do you want
Right.
it? Oh, hell yes. You definitely want it. Without a doubt.
And maybe we can talk about this in the show, but I started to get into iRacing, especially the dirt ovals on iRacing, just to help me better understand different conditions and like sliding
Yeah.
in corners, coming out of the corners, and things like that. And um, the season hasn't started yet, but I'm already assuming that I'm better prepared just because of all the iRacing, even though it's completely different than the go karts because the go karts don't have suspensions and all
Right.
that. But yeah.
Two things. It's already in the show, so yes, it's definitely going to be a part of the show.
All right.
And the second thing is, yeah, man, it's definitely going to pay dividends. It will. Um, the more time you spend behind the virtual steering wheel, the more time you spend in that virtual seat, it will pay dividends in the real world no matter what you're driving. And it will pay dividends on so many levels. Like, reading track conditions, iRacing got that really right. I mean, you can
Mhm.
really see the line. You can see it slick up in certain areas of the track, depending on where people are actually putting their wheels more. If everybody's running down low, the bottom of the track's going to go away. If everybody's running in the middle of the track's going to go away. Same thing
Yeah.
for the cushion. And like last night, I was actually running last night in I think there were like 60 of us in street stocks. And we had like D through A mains
Oh wow,
and 3 or 4 heats of 8 cars each. And
that's a whole night.
it's, dude, it's epic. It's so epic. It's so much fun. Um, and it pays dividends in the real world, from everything from racecraft to reading the track to car control and that oversteer understeer or you know tight to push scenario where you're actually feeling what the car's doing underneath you. And that is one thing that I will say, yes, this is better than the Logitechs or the entry level Thrustmasters. I mean, a direct drive wheel is a whole other level. And I
Hmm.
don't. Where are you at on the planet?
I'm in Toledo, Ohio.
Damn it, you're too far away. I was gonna say, if you're anywhere near, you're welcome to come by the lab anytime, man.
I know from driving the go kart. In I only participated in one actual race last year, and there was a couple of open practices where I will say I have three different times out on the track, and all three times it was completely exhausting because there's no power steering on the go-kart
Yeah,
and you're really
yeah,
fighting it. And the way the go-kart steering geometry works is you turn left, the left front tire raises so it puts the weight on the other tires, and so you're actually like manhandling this tiny little frame around the track.
oh
And I
yeah.
would
There's
just
weight
come,
jacking and Ackerman, and you're
yeah,
moving around in the seat to get the weight transfer right. And yeah,
I would just come out, uh, I would get out of the cart and I'm just next 5 minutes just trying to catch my breath, and like the next day I would be so sore. And so I do want to get one of those. I want to upgrade the steering wheel just so I'm getting a little bit more of that feedback, that force feedback, and I'm fighting the steering wheel a little bit more.
you can literally turn. This is a 20 Newton meter wheel. You can turn the force feedback up on this wheel to the point where you will get an upper body workout.
That's what I want.
Like a proper upper body workout. And there's enough power, and this is the DD1. they make a DD2 that I think this is 20 Newton meters. I think the DD2 is 25 Newton meters. Maybe might even be 30. There are some out there like Augury and some other direct drive wheels that literally go all the way up to 30 Newton meters. The crazy thing about these things, though, if you're running that level of force feedback and you know that you're getting ready to bin it, like if you literally money the cart or the car that you're in, you better be ready to take your hands off the wheel, because it's enough force it'll take a thumb off, man. I mean, it's that kind of power, and it's instantaneous. Like it literally, it'll jack you up, man. If you're not.
Yeah. What is yours mounted to?
Ours is quarter inch plate, quarter-inch aluminum plate.
I mean, like, I see the steering wheel in front of you. What, like, do you? I think you're green screened, so I can't see the scenario that you're in. Are you in a frame? Or do you have
I'll show you. Hang on just a second. This is making for compelling podcasting, ladies and gentlemen.
Why
I'm already ruining the podcast.
No, why Sean's converting over to show the video, people, his simulator. I'll say, welcome to No Driving Gloves. It's Sean, Will sitting in the corner quiet. It's obviously John. And I'm going to probably mutilate your last name, David. I'm sorry. I've heard you all the time. But David Picciuto. Am I close?
Pretty close. Picciuto.
Picciuto. He has a podcast, Making It, that I've listened to since I think I started like episode 11. And, of course, listen to them all now. And you guys are, approaching 200, over 200. And David has a YouTube channel, Make Something. And I've always considered restoration and people who build cars and that kind of makers. So I've always listened to him. And recently he's come into the car hobby and picked up go-karting and has alluded to on some of his YouTube and podcasts that he's getting a little bit more into cars. You know, he's mentioned a couple other YouTube channels that are car things and that. And I sent him a message and said, hey, why don't you come on the show? We'll talk to somebody who's new to the car world, because you know, between Sean, Will, and I, you're probably looking at 90 to 120 years of car experience.
Disturbing number of years of car experience.
And you know, David's kind of new to that. Plus, Sean's go-karted since he was, you know, a wee little lad, and Will builds cars and welds and that, and David's actually... You bought a go-kart to run last year. You bought another one to improve on that, and then you decided to build one, correctly?
Yes, you've been paying attention. That is correct, yeah.
So
John's been cyber stalking you, that's all.
So there's a little of the whole premise of the show. So David's instructions is to come on the show with questions and kind of quiz us, and then we'll get a little bit of feel for his take on the car hobby with some crazy car guys, and I think he jumped at the chance. But that's where we're at. Sean's got a picture of his simulator. For those of you watching on YouTube, when we switch back to Sean, it'll be there.
Oh,
yeah.
And
okay, Sean's serious.
Yeah.
That's Sean's company. They make.
Yeah, we actually build those.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, we actually build those. Nemesis Lab came into light about 2 years ago, and it basically came from, we've been involved in simulation professionally for the better part of 20 years, and I have been very fortunate to be part owner of a couple software development houses that worked in the 3D world and physics development and sound design. So we built cars, tracks, textures, physics development, sound development, all that good stuff. And then I got to consult for hardware companies over the years, and got to the point where about 2 years ago, I was like, if I'm ever going to build what I really want to build, I got to do it myself, which falls right in line with what you do, David. I mean, you make stuff. So it's absolutely perfect. And that literally, what you see behind me is 7 prototypes, 7 prototype designs, and two years and 4 months of research and development. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure you can relate to that on multiple levels with what you have built on your channels. So yeah,
it takes many iterations to get something right.
It really does, man. Like I can't tell you how many times have you? This is a really good segue. Thanks for setting that up, John and David. How many times have you, over the course of the last season or season and a half that you've been racing, and you're building your own kart now, and you've basically gone into the whole make stuff ethos that you put together? How many times have you gone back to the drawing board in just that year and a half?
I think the answer is going to surprise you. I don't go back to the drawing board very often.
Really?
So yeah. So
you've already surprised me. I'm shocked.
a lot of times what happens is I'll get an idea, especially if I'm filming it for the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
I'll draw it out to the point where I've been doing woodworking and things like that for a few years now. So I have a pretty good idea on what's going to be successful. The only times I'm not 100% is when you draw something up in the 3D world, you don't get an actual feel for how that piece is going to live in the real world. So sometimes I'll build the thing and then it'll function as it's supposed to, but it doesn't look right. So something about it. And
or the other way. Yeah.
The other way.
Yeah.
Or the other way. And with so doing YouTube videos is my career. And so if it doesn't come out right, that's it. I just move on to the next thing. And then hopefully that next project comes out right. So I don't go through the iterations of building something 3 or 4 or 5 times.
That sounds like me cooking dinner, man.
Yeah, you make a bad dinner, family's got to eat it.
On to the next one.
Yeah, on to the next one. Now with the go-kart build, I have been as John mentioned, I bought basically a race-ready package last year so I could dive into it. And I was like, I'm going to clone this kart. I'm getting into metalworking. I want to do some fabrication, some tube bending and tube notching and all that. So, and then I realized like the kart that I had, the steering geometry wasn't the norm for the type of races that I do. And there was like this weight jacker built into it, which this kart was probably from the late 90s, early 2000s. So things have changed since then.
Yeah.
And so I decided I'm going to sell this. I'm going to get a more modern kart with a more common steering geometry. And then I will clone that. And I'm not cloning this kart to sell. This is just for me. This is like a learning process for me. So when the season starts, I think it's actually going to start in June. We'll see how, the world, we are going to have some private practices, like an invite only type thing. And so at a couple of the tracks. So that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that in a couple of weeks. But the actual season is supposed to start in June. But the go-kart that I'm going to start off racing is the one that I purchased because I want to get a feel for the kart to understand what I'm supposed to feel and when I'm racing. When I get a better understanding of that, then I'm going to take the one that I built onto the track and see how that compares to the other one. And if I can do the different setups and see if I can make it act like it's supposed to. And then I'm lucky enough to know some more experienced racers that they can hop in and say, yeah, this feels right, or this is totally off. But with a go-kart, I don't think it's going to be totally off because most of the setup is in tire pressure and steering geometry and stuff. So I think I'm going to be okay. But this one, I'm hoping to run like the second half of the season with this one that I'm building. Maybe next year I build a better one. Now that I understand why the tube is bent this way and why it goes together this way, that I can continue building my own over the years. I don't ever plan on building a kart for anybody else.
Oh, I see a go-kart chassis manufacturer coming.
I've already have so many hobbies that I could not even. There's no time to do work for other people.
2 years from now, we're gonna hear Rob Howden announcing it at a WKA event. The Make Something kart chassis seems to be the chassis of choice this year.
I know the feeling all too well. I mean, people try to get us involved in so much crap all the time. And, you know, saying no is really hard for me. But over the last 5 years, I've learned to just, you know, stick with what I've spent 20 years building, you know, and just keep doing what I do.
So for the people that don't know, my background is mostly woodworking. I would say 90% of the stuff on my YouTube channel is woodworking, and that's the thing that I know and I'm comfortable with. But I've been getting into the metalworking and the fabrication stuff. And if we want to, we can go into how and why I got into the go-kart racing. I race on dirt ovals, and one of the things that really drew me to go-kart racing was like all the making that is involved. So I'm making my own chassis, which is pretty unusual in the circle, but a lot of people have to make their own bodies, or there's certain parts break, and it's not like there's a go-kart store around the corner where you can go and get a new part that next day. And so some people are fabricating their own pieces to to run throughout the season. And the making part of racing is what I actually love. I love, like today I'm working on the body. I've been bending plastic and shaping body, and I've got a coat of primer drying right now, and I just love that part. And I'm kind of worried that when I get finished making the go-kart, like I'm gonna be bored with it. Like, oh, I'm just racing now and not making any parts anymore. But that's one of the things that I love about racing. And there's a lot of people in racing that don't have a shop and aren't making. I don't even know how you can be into racing and not be able to cut and weld and make the pieces that you need. It doesn't even make sense to me.
I can tell you. You want to know how?
Sean's a lot like that. I'm like you, David. It's even like 3D printers and that. If I want a 3D printer, I want to buy kind of like a Prussian kit, so I put it together and understand what's going on there. Part. Yeah, I made a mistake and I bought a pre-built CNC for my wood shop. You know, that's kind of my hobby. That's not my career. We're kind of opposite there. I bought a pre-built one, and it's bothering me because now I'm seeing some of the new kit stuff coming out, and I go, boy, I really wish I would have spent the money on a Picciuto or an Inventables machine, just so that I know what the problems are. You know, I understand the issues that come with them, but if you know every piece and how everything works, it's so much better. And I think, you know, you building a cart and things like that. I was on one of the last episodes of MakerCast, the podcast that went away about 3 years ago. And part of the conversation was how car builders and restoration people are really the ultimate makers, because one day I'm fabricating a steel chassis, then I'm shaping aluminum, then you're 3D printing, and then you're working with fiberglass. You're doing all this various making. And when you race, I think you'll find that you're going to figure out little things you can tweak and change. So it's not going to be, oh, the cart's done. If you fall in and you get the passion, you know, it's one reason I don't race is I don't make enough money because I want to win. You'll have the ability to go, okay, I built everything. I want to go faster. Maybe I adjust this or move this wheel, or, you know, adjust a camber setting, or all these little things that you can adjust on the cart. First, you'll know how it was built to be able to do it, and what pluses and minuses. So it could, you know, keep your interest on a totally different level you don't even see.
Here's what I want to go ahead and do, David. I want to go ahead and book you for No Driving Gloves on, let's say, May 7th, 2024. And we can talk about the chassis manufacturing, body manufacturing, and the national championship consultation that you're starting to give people. Because honestly, you have the makings of, and the personality type for, and the skill set to be a chassis manufacturer. You have that analytical side. I've seen it by going through your social channels on Make Something. I mean, and if you truly get it, like John said, if you truly get into motorsport, and Will brought this up too, if you get into motorsport, you are literally going to have people going, I got to have one of your chassis, man. It happens. I've seen it. I'm not kidding. I've been involved in this for 45 plus years now. You're going to get sucked in.
Well, I mean, my family's been involved in racing my entire life. And like the ultimate dream would be to race a sprint car. Like I just grew up around sprint cars. I was around them all the time. And just like at 44 years old, it's probably not going to happen unless I go to one of those sprint car racing schools down south. But that would be a goal. Like if, you know, when we book that show in 2024, I would love to tell you about my chassis building business and how I'm doing with the World of Outlaws. So yeah,
it's coming. I'm not kidding. It's definitely, you're on that. You're potentially on that progression. And you know, I don't know how deep the racing bug has got you.
Oh boy.
But it seems pretty.
He's going to be hanging out with Tony Stewart and Rico and
right.
You know.
So he's just across the state line.
Yeah.
Have you driven a winged outlaw kart?
No.
Oh my God.
So I might get into the wing outlaw karts next year. So the circuit that I'm racing is the go-kart circuit that I'm racing now. It's technically a backyard circuit, so there's like 7-8 tracks, and they're actually in people's backyards.
Yeah.
But it's like extremely organized. Like the final race that I went into last year, there were 60 entries, and then there was probably 200 people watching. So like that's an extreme of the circuit that I'm racing, because that's like the big finale.
Mm-hmm.
But so the people that are running that circuit, one of them is my cousin who races sprint cars. He got an outlaw kart last year, and so he decided that, hey, we're going to also start an outlaw kart circuit, and that one's starting this year, but there's not that many people that have the karts to run. So this year's kind of a test season, and then next year they are going to do a full season with the outlaw karts. And what I like about the outlaw karts, if you don't know, is they have a wing for downforce and for helping you cornering, but there's also a roll cage, which is a little bit more protective than driving a regular go-kart.
Oh yeah,
that's the thing that really appeals to me, is the protection, because you're going so fast.
Yeah, the 500cc versions of those things are manic.
Yeah, it's insane. So there's a photo on my screen here. Is this a outlaw kart simulator?
Yeah. Well, no, it's actually an outlaw simulator that we're developing right now.
Oh, that's crazy.
What's the point of that? Just because it looks cool?
Because it's freaking cool, Will.
Yeah.
I mean, the wing on a simulator is absolutely. I mean, in case people walk by you, it helps the air go around you better or something?
Here's the thing. That for someone who races World of Outlaws makes a lot of sense, just because it's cool looking. The other side of it is at an experiential event, you know, at a SEMA or a PRI, or insert whatever show your brand is going to. Now imagine that on a proper yaw chassis, on a yaw frame, and you're sitting in the middle of PRI or SEMA, and every time you roll into a corner, this whole chassis yaws and the wings moving, and it just gets the crowd going. That's really all it's for, but it looks cool.
Well,
and the gentleman
to me, it looks like the wings just kind of hovering up there.
It is right now.
You're gonna have it hung from the ceiling by cords, or
it attaches to your helmet.
It's magnets.
Dude, there you go.
Magnets.
Hopefully there's some controls in the cockpit where you can actually move it forward and back a little bit.
I can make all that work. Don't make me do it.
Sean's simulators are modular, so this is an option package. I'm sure he can throw in. You know, you get your race car, and then you get your airplane, because he'll have airplane wings you can add on, and your Outlaw chassis with those wings.
Oh, right behind me right now is our captain's chair Star Trek edition. Literally has two consoles, one on the left, one on the right, and it has flight controls and do really nerdy geeky stuff. Really nice nerdy geek.
I love it.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, we do. I with that at all. Yeah, but I was only showing you that just because we started talking about outlaw carts, and I was like, I got you. And you mentioned World of Outlaws, and the thing is, I mean, obviously an outlaw compared to a cart, totally different seating position. Mm-hmm. The wheel is rotated up. It's almost like a school bus. The pedal position is literally straight up and down like a cargo van. That's the things that are kind of cool to be able to train the simulator on, because you go from that completely flat floor, feet straight out in front of you, cart position, to sitting in a cargo van with the pedals are damn near up and down. The gas and the brake and the steering wheel is all school bussed up, and you need to be able to get acclimated to that stuff. And
yeah, it'll feel familiar to you once you hop into the real thing. Yeah.
Yep, totally. I'm fascinated by your transition into motorsport, and you said you had your family's been in racing, you said, for a long time. So did you grow up around the racetrack? Did you grow up around other forms of racing? Or
I did. So my uncle, his name is Johnny Bieber, and in the Ohio, Pennsylvania area, he's probably pretty well known, especially like in the 80s and maybe going into the 90s a little bit. Lots of track champions in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and in the early 80s he ran with the World of Outlaws. I think the Outlaws started in maybe 78 or something. So my uncle John, he raced for a living. All my childhood he raced for a living. So, and my dad would take me to there would be a race at a track called Attica Raceway Park in Ohio on Friday. And then there's another Fremont Speedway Raceway Park in Fremont, Ohio on Saturday, and then another place in Findlay, and then on Sunday. So sometimes we would go to 3 sprint car races in a weekend, and I was all about it. So you go to a sprint car race, usually there's like 3 divisions. There's like street stocks, the 305, which is a sprint car, which just at that time they called it an econo. So it was like the economy sprint car with the smaller engine. And then the 410 sprints. And when the street stocks were out on the track, me and my buddies were all playing football, on the other side of the grandstand. But as soon as the sprint cars came on the track, we were all like totally into it. And so I grew up around my Uncle John racing over at his garage. And I just thought he was the coolest because people loved him because he was winning all the time. Or people also hated him because he was winning all the time. So I grew up both ways. Yeah, it goes both ways. So I just grew up around that. And then my Uncle John, he doesn't race anymore, but he owns this fabrication shop, which basically repairs sprint cars. And he's one of the more well-known places in the country. So people will haul their chassis from California to Ohio just so the Biebers will work on it, because for whatever reason, they're the go-to for a chassis that gets into a wreck or bent or whatever. They're great.
I would say that reason is because they know what the hell they're doing.
I mean, they've been. John's been in racing since the 60s, so it's crazy. And so now his son, my cousin Tony, he races on sprint cars, but he doesn't do it for a living. His living is with the family shop of repairing cars. For a while, they were making chassis, but they got out of that. The money is actually in repairing chassis.
Yep.
So
a lot less overhead.
Yeah, right. Like even though the season hasn't started yet, if you walk into their shop, there's probably 30 chassis just sitting butt end up, just stacked, waiting to be worked on. Like they're always backed up, and there's always so much work for them to do because they're the go-to people. So I grew up around sprint car racing. My father also loved NASCAR. So as a child, I loved NASCAR. And then something hit me, like, not something. I got into music when I was like 17 or 18, like punk rock. And I was like, oh, you can't like sports. So I stopped watching football and baseball and racing because it wasn't cool. I had to, I was playing in bands and stuff. And then something happened a few years ago. I'm like, oh yeah, I used to love football and baseball and racing. So I've been getting back into it now. Like I'm, I don't have that. You can like punk rock and racing. There's
amazing.
room for both. I was just ignorant for a good 20
You
years.
were hardcore punk rock.
Yeah.
You were living the lifestyle.
And so my dad, he passed away 3 years ago, but throughout my entire life, he had been working on this 1967 Chevy Impala, which he was rebuilding from scratch. And like you could eat off the engine. It was so clean. It was all painted and just an absolute beautiful car. So I grew up around cars and I grew up around racing. But the truth is, I don't know that much about cars. Like when my car doesn't start, I just go to the dealership and trade it in and get a new one. That's me. I know so little about cars, but I'm a quick learner. And my family, the Biebers that I was talking about, they built my go-kart engine. So it's basically the class that I run in. They call them a stock appearing clone class, which is a Harbor Freight Predator 212 engine. So from the outside, it has to look like a Predator 212 engine, but the inside you can do whatever you want up into there's certain limits. So there's, on top of the $100 price tag of that engine, there's $700 worth of parts and upgrades inside there. So they built that engine for me, but next year, because I love learning stuff, I am going to learn how to build my own engine, and I'm going to do that. Like it's the thing that I love about motorsports is there's so much making involved, and there's like, it just feels like there's an endless possibility of learning. And for what I do, I make content for a living. Like there's so many videos. Like I can, as I'm learning, I can make these videos and share them with my audience, and it's endless. And it's the thing that's got me excited about making videos again, because if I've been doing woodworking for like a professional, I'm quote unquote YouTuber for 5 years now, and the woodworking kind of gets boring. So I'm glad that like there's this new thing that I'm into. And
we won't let anyone
so
on your woodworking channels hear this, because that would
Well, it's like
And
your podcast co-hosts. I mean, they aren't exclusively woodworkers anymore. They do everything. Jimmy being, the guy that does everything in the world. So
yeah,
I think what you're doing and how you're changing your channel, for a guy like me, it works, because I want to see you do different things. I do enjoy when you go back and do a little bit of woodworking, but I enjoy the other stuff that goes along with it, just to see a different way of doing it, or go, oh no, he should do it this way. But I don't want to comment, because I don't know how to comment and not be one of those trolls. So I think I did that to April way back when she was new. I said something and I keep saying that she'll hate me forever. So, but
I remember like Mark Spagnolo, he is huge in the woodworking field. And before I was doing this for a living, I remember like making some snotty comments like, that's not how this other person does it, you're doing it wrong. And so now as I receive those comments, I'm like, oh, that's cute.
Oh. Oh. What's cool though is you get to take the years and years of experience that you have doing what you've done with the make something and the woodworking side of things, and seeing how that translates over to the vehicular side. That the skill set that you built up, and you're going to approach some things in a methodical way that you would have done during the woodworking stuff in the kart racing, and you're not even going to realize you did it until it's done. Seriously, I've seen it happen time and time again, and the cool thing about that is that's where new ideas come from. That's where new technique. That's where just the melding of a particular skill set with a new skill set, and then all of a sudden you're like, well, why is that the way it's done when this makes so much more sense to me? And then if you can show that it does make sense and that it does actually work, and then it does whatever, whether it's saving money, saving time, making the cart faster, making the cart more reliable, making the car that, it goes on and on from there. But the only reason I'm saying all that is I'm just going to go ahead and say again, welcome to the wonderful world of being a chassis manufacturer.
I remember when I was first got into woodworking, and one of the challenges is clamping, because clamps are stupid expensive. And I mean, every tool is stupid expensive, but clamps aren't a sexy tool. Like, you get a new table saw, that's a thing to get excited about. You get some new clamps, you're like, I just spent hundreds of dollars on a stupid thing that's going to sit in the drawer. It doesn't even look cool. But I remember, so when you don't have all those clamps, you get creative on different ways of holding pieces together or holding it to the bench. And I kind of miss that, because after you do something for so long, you just become, you're only in this bubble, and you only know the proper woodworking ways to do something, or to clamp something, or to make that cut. And so now that I'm experiencing with the metal fabrication stuff, like, I don't know, and I don't always go and research. I just like, oh, I need to cut this weird compound angle. This is how I would do it in the wood shop. Maybe this will apply here, and
that's
so
exactly it's exactly what I was saying.
You're definitely more creative when you don't know.
Instead of clamps. Yeah, it's magnets instead of clamps. How many of those clamp-like tools do you have in your shop, Will? I mean, it's thousands.
my biggest drawer in my toolbox is, completely full to the rim of all sorts of clamps and vice grips. And then one of my fab tables, one whole end is nothing but clamps hanging off of it. And that's just on the sheet metal fab side. You go over to the machining fab side, and it's clamps. So
one of the so on the front end of the go-kart chassis, like, most of it is flat and sits on a perfectly flat surface until you get up to where the spindles are, and so it curves in to make room for the tires, but also goes up, so to level out when you have the wheels on the chassis. And so there's a compound curve in there, and then there's a piece of tubing that runs between the two long rails. I'm having a hard time like figuring out how to clamp this up, and I'll get some magnets on there and it's barely holding, and then as soon as I get the welder up there, it falls, and it's frustrating. So I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go grab some 2x4s, and I'm going to cut the 30-degree angle here, and I'm going to cut a 60-degree angle here, and then I'm going to just clamp them to the pieces. And so I'm using all my woodworking tools and scraps to make jigs to hold the metal pieces. And I know it's not the right way, but it's working, and it's getting me by, and it's holding the pieces together.
Tubing's the hardest material there are to clamp together and hold at the right angle, and especially something like that. I know exactly what you're talking about, where it curves inward, then it curves upward. And what I'll go ahead and save you a little bit of trouble, since you're going to be a chassis manufacturer one day.
He doesn't know it yet. He doesn't realize it yet. He's already there.
Just go ahead and buy you a CNC tubing bender, and you can bend all of that in one piece. Then you won't have to weld it together.
A what? A CNC tubing bender?
Yeah, they make them. You just program in the bends, and it bends it.
This sounds a little out of my budget.
Oh, you're a YouTuber. Y'all make billions of dollars, right?
You're gonna
yeah. As I'm sitting in my mansion.
One of my good friends.
My mansions, yeah.
One of my good friends is a professional YouTuber, so I know. I mean, he's these kids that go out and spend, $400,000 buying a grocery store. They've got it's not the reality of making a living on YouTube. you know.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. And plus, I don't have millions of subscribers, so
right.
like I am. I do pretty good, and then the YouTubing stuff allows me to explore new hobbies and stuff. But it's not like, I'm in my east wing of Mansion B, you know.
He's a
Mansion B.
woodworker on YouTube, not a gamer on YouTube.
Oh, that makes
Yeah,
me happy.
exactly.
Yeah, the gamers.
I'm in my east wing of Mansion B.
I was going to say to you, though, but my last job was at the Barber Museum down here in Birmingham, and it's the world's largest collection of motorcycles and largest collection of Lotus race cars and that. And I was on the car side of the museum doing restoration. We had a whole section of our shelving unit in the parts room that was nothing but wood scraps. And there's a complete woodworking shop there to build displays that we were in all the time. So even there, you know, in kind of a professional world where we had a full CNC machine shop and, you know, a 5 by 10 foot water jet table and plating machines and all of that, we're still using wood to jig things up and stack things.
Oh yeah,
you know, make it work.
We do it all the time. We make a lot of one-off trim out of like half oval brass and stuff like that. We've got 2x4s that are 6 foot long with a half oval, you know, rip down the middle of it, and it'll sit flush in there, and you can drill and everything else. So, hey, John, quick question: mute or don't mute? We were supposed to talk about that before the show.
Oh, don't mute. It's so much easier to edit. Is everybody there?
So I've been
Actually,
I have a glass of
there we
whiskey
go.
with ice
What?
in there, and I've been muting as I'm drinking.
Cheers.
that was gin.
We
It
used to
was.
have a rule against that, but I think last episode with Courtney Hansen, we kind of put that to the wind.
When I'm crunching
Not that
ice,
she
that's
was the
only
cause
time
of
I
it by any means.
Oh, it's awesome. So awesome. I don't know whether you can see the background, but I had to bring up clamps just because that's all we were talking about there for a while. That's clamps.
What is clamps from?
Futurama.
Okay. I
was so addicted to that show, man.
I've only seen a few episodes.
Oh.
It's like I'll get into a show and I really love a show, but animated series I have a hard time connecting to.
I'm
like,
the same way.
Everybody loves The Simpsons. I'm like, yeah, I like The Simpsons. I don't love The Simpsons.
I like The Simpsons, but I loved Futurama.
And even South Park. I mean, we're all at the age where when we were a lot younger, South Park was the thing to watch, and
yeah,
I never did.
I just had a hard time connecting with it.
You don't realize.
And whoever thought Beavis and Butthead would be telling true stories?
It got even more true when he went out and did Idiocracy. Good Lord.
I was always out in the shop. So
I was always on a motorcycle or a bike. Literally, like when I was young, but when I was young, that was before The Simpsons. It was well and truly before then.
When I was in high school was when South Park was huge, and I mean I was out in the shop working on the race car.
You were nothing but a youngin'. Good Lord,
so,
you're a youngin'. I feel, as the elder statesman of the podcast, I feel as though I need to talk about the times before South Park.
I thought you was going to say I need to quit.
Let's talk about Bugs Bunny. Remember Bugs Bunny? It's.
I'll go to a whole different level though, and David recommended Devs the other day on the podcast.
Oh man.
Yeah, thanks. That was
if you guys haven't watched dark.
Yeah, if you haven't watched Devs,
what is Devs? I'm completely and totally lost on that.
It's on. It's Nick Offerman.
And, then he's my
and
guy.
Think of him as, I'm going to loosely say, Steve Jobs. And after that, I can't really tell you anything else. Otherwise, I'll probably destroy the show.
Oh, so it's like software development and stuff.
Yeah.
But dark.
But dark. Okay, cool. I consider this.
It's on Hulu, right?
This is kind of my Nick Offerman starter kit. Like it's
You're there. You're halfway there.
Yeah.
Not even close to Nick and Devs, though.
Yeah, Nick has long.
I'm closer to Nick.
Damn, that's awesome.
So,
Okay.
John, what is the open wheel derby car, or what's behind you in your image there?
I try to do an image that kind of relates to each show anymore, and usually it comes
Okay.
off of a Pixabay, and that's just a wooden toy race car. And
It's
then
a
of course
Mercedes, but it's got the
yeah.
Ferrari red, so I'm a little
Yeah.
confused.
Well,
It's to keep you guessing.
it's children. I really wanted to do a picture of I had a Pinewood Derby car, and there's not a chance you'll know what it is, and Will and Sean will roll their eyes, but it's a little Dodge Rampage, and it looked just like a Rampage, and that's like a El Camino type pickup that Dodge built. I couldn't find it to put it in the background, but
I knew you had an unholy Rampage obsession, but I had no idea that it went that deep.
Yep.
I had
little red Rampage, and it was even cut with the proper raised headlights, and I'll find it one day and it'll show up.
There is a good segue into
okay. I had to Google image search what
Rampage.
Yeah, now I'm like, it's like
now he's like, oh yeah, that's
the Dodge version of the El Camino.
Yes.
So
hey, David, does it not scream punk rock?
It does scream punk rock. Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah. I mean, I would have no problem driving around in a Dodge Rampage.
Especially bright green.
It's got the right name too, you know. I mean,
yeah.
Let's spin this over into Roblox. Let's spin this over into another Viviani obsession.
84 Isuzus.
We talked about
what's the wooden toy car that is it Roblox? What's the
Automoblox.
Automoblox. There you go. Are you familiar with Automoblox, David? And have you built any wooden vehicular toys? As soon as you look up Automoblox, you're going to be like, "Ooh, I'm going to the shop." We're literally going to like wrap the show up, and David's going to be out there going, "I'm making stuff."
They look super cool.
They are very cool.
They were really cool when they came out, but John's a little pretentious, and
so am I.
And they had the most gorgeous packaging when they first came out, and it was like unwrapping this, wonderful watch or timepiece. But then they decided to go to retail shelves and toy stores, and when they did that, all these government regulations came into play on safety warnings and how they had to be packaged, and the packaging just became no more than a shoebox. And I kind of stopped buying them then, but I've got a pretty good collection of them. I don't think I've put them out on display though since I've moved. I was looking forward to putting them in my new office, which I may or may not do now. But
how many of those things do you have?
Glad you brought this into my world. These are beautiful.
They are really cool.
And all the parts are interchangeable, and you can. Is there
a community of people who customize them and I would have to imagine.
Back when I was into them, I haven't really played with them for 3 or 4 years. There was a lot of online stuff, and Automoblox was really in tune and really paid attention to the consumer. And even when the packaging changed, the reason I know what I know is we communicated with 10 or 15 emails about it, and they were going to try to continue the other packaging for mail order, and that all went away, and then they got bought out. And like I said, I tuned them out, went somewhere else, but they are very, you can buy wheel and tire sets for them and change the colors of the tires and different wheels. And, I got a bunch of them somewhere.
All right, David, woodworked carts, karting toys in the vein of what you're looking at right now. There's your chassis manufacturing gig. Go.
So as I was drawing up, I'm basically cloning a cart that I already purchased that somebody else already did all the science and research, but for my own amusement, I drew it up in Fusion 360 so I'd have this model. I'm like, well, I have this model of the chassis, I might as well 3D print it. And I suck at 3D printing, and I tried like 3 times and it never worked out. There's 3D printing is a whole that if you want to get into it, you can't just start today and you'll be a great 3D printer. Like there's lots of things you have to learn, and
We
it
can
never
do that.
came
We can
out.
do that for you. We can make that happen. We can make it a reality.
Right.
Everything behind me right now is Fusion 360.
Oh man, yeah. So I have a lot to learn, and that's another thing is there's the software side of designing all of this, and I have a graphic design background. It's what I went to school for, so I love the computer part of everything just as much as the actual physical putting pieces together.
That's half the fun, man. I mean,
No.
it's the journey that we've been on the R&D. I'm sure is very similar to the journey that you've been on, David, with the cart. And I don't want to speak for John or Will, but I do want your response to this. Isn't the build is more than half the fun to me? Like the research and development path that we've gone down to get to where we are with what you're seeing behind me right now. That journey's been an absolute blast, man. Like going through the prototypes. And do you get that, Will, when you're going from concept to paper to actual, out in the shop and forming stuff out of metal? Is that what you love, or is it?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's that's why I do it. It's not riding around in it when you get done. But I mean, don't get me wrong. That's
still fun.
pretty cool too.
That's the reward.
Yeah.
Right. That's the reward. Where your reward hopefully is making money. I'm making money as I'm building it, where you're spending all your money while you're building it. So, I mean, I could see more in your instance, Sean, where I enjoy making money too. I'm not gonna lie.
I don't think there's many people that don't.
So
Right.
I would enjoy once I got finished and it took off and then I started making a bunch of money. Don't
get me wrong. We're looking forward to that, as I'm sure everyone
that
on
would
this
be
podcast.
pretty enjoyable too. But
Yeah.
Fortunate for me, I'm making money as I'm producing my product. And then the cool thing about that's even better. Once it's finished for the customer lets me have it for a couple of years to go show it. So I get to wear the new off of it and then give it to the customer. I mean, I got the best of both worlds, right?
That part of the hot rod world has always blown my mind, and I'm not sure how you guys have built that into the industry. But
You said a couple of years?
Yes, it's insane.
Yeah,
What?
Totally insane.
Yeah, you've got it. Well, it depends on when you debut your car. So we like debuting cars either really, really early in the year or late in the year. So to us in the hot rod industry, SEMA is day one of the year. So when you're talking to a car guy and they say this year, well, that's between November and November. So if you debut a car at SEMA, you got SEMA, and then you generally take it back to your shop and get it ready to do the outdoor show thing. Good Guys, NSRA, stuff like that. So you've got a year to do that. Well, after a year doing Good Guys, then you can have a year or so of hitting smaller shows, ISCA shows, and stuff like that. So, if you've got a really big car, you can get 2 years out of it.
Wow.
So
now,
after that, it's not going to win anymore. It's done. So.
Yeah. Now, Will builds on the very high end of the industry. There's some cars I think he builds and then they just go away and he never sees them again. But it's even like in restoration. Sometimes, we'll take 3 or 4 years to do a restoration. And the most fun to me in a restoration is researching and figuring out what was correct. And I always did, factory original Concours type restoration. So everything was exactly the way it, quote, came from the factory.
Oh, yeah.
And researching and figuring out how to make those parts or where to acquire those parts. And, you do 90% of the work and you have 10% left. And that's really not 90% of the work again, because that's the hardest stuff and the stuff you put off. And then when you're done, you get to take the car and show it for the client. Sometimes they'll keep it at their house, but more often than not, every show you take it to during that first year, you find something that needs to be tweaked or adjusted or tweaked. So it's always coming back to the shop, and you get to play with it for a year, and then you give it back to the client, and then they have it for a few years, and then it ends up at Barrett Jackson or something, and you start over again.
That's exactly how we've, like Sean alluded to, how we've worked that in. It's the shakedown process. It's getting it ready so when you deliver that car, it's done. They're not going to have any problems with it. All the wiring sorted. Because, we're building these cars with either one-off machine, handmade parts, or aftermarket parts. And everybody, I'm sure, has dealt with aftermarket electronics. They suck. There are some out there that are actually pretty good, but you get a hold of the wrong company that doesn't have good electronics, man, it can be your worst enemy. And like David's building his go-kart. A lot of times we'll build a one-off chassis and we'll get totally creative and try to come up with some crazy ass suspension so the coilovers are cantilevered up into the trunk floor and you see them through the hat rack and all sorts of crazy, goofy crap. And on paper, it works great. Just, on CAD, it works great. But in reality, it rides like a horse and buggy and sucks ass. So, there's, and there's no second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth renditions. You got to get it right the first time. If not,
right,
it's money out of your pocket.
John mentioned the research involved into restoring something. So I was born in 1975. My parents got divorced in, I think, 77. And my dad's lawyer suggested, go buy yourself a nice car and work on that just to keep you busy or whatever. So he bought this 67 Chevy Impala. And so throughout the 80s, I remember my dad fixing this up. And it started off as all original parts and restoring it to it wasn't an SS, so it was just restoring it to its original condition. And back then that was super hard. He got these weird catalogs from some junkyard in Kansas City to another place in California, and then you actually have to call them on the phone to see if they had the tail light that you need or whatever, right? And so it was a lot of work. It wasn't just typing in I need a 1967 blah 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 blah, and it would just show up at your door 2 days later. So there was a lot of work in there. And then he blew the engine. I think, I'm not a car guy, so I think the original engine for an Impala was a 305, and then he ended up putting a 350 in there, and so it was no longer original. And so then it was open game. So then he started adding the SS package stuff to it, and then it was contacting more junkyards throughout the country and on the telephone all the time and getting these weird homemade catalogs that people would make in the mail. And it was just, I think the joy of it was not knowing if you were going to get the part back then to restore it. And you couldn't email a photo. So if you're getting a new taillight or a new bumper or something, sent across the country to get re-chromed or whatever, it was you were just crossing your fingers hoping it would come back in the condition that you were hoping to get. And so that was fun. And that, if I can tell you a terrible car story, so this 1967 Impala was his baby. He had been working on this, all my life. When I was 15 years old, my buddy Brian Smith, he is a sprint car driver, and he has been for the last 30 years. But he was coming over to shoot pool in our garage, and I was 15. My dad was at work, and I backed out that Impala so many times, dozens of times, to play pool so it wouldn't get hurt. I was allowed to back out the Impala, but this one particular day, I hit the side of the garage backing it up. Instead of just stopping, I kept going. So I ruined the entire rear quarter panel of this car. And I was so embarrassed. So I did not tell Brian that it happened. We just played pool. And then before my dad was supposed to come home from work, I shoot him off and said, you have to go back home. And my dad, he comes home and I was like, Dad, I hit the garage with the car. He didn't even look at it. He just didn't say a word. He just walked into the house. Now he is known for being like a hothead. He would explode. And I was so worried. And he had this reaction that I didn't know how to react to because he didn't say a word. He just went into the house. So I don't know what to do. So I'm like doing yard work or whatever. He comes out like 30 minutes later and he finally looks at it and it's just like, well, insurance will cover it. We'll get it fixed. And I was like, what? Like that was not the reaction. Decades later, talking to him, he told me that he went into the house to have a beer to calm down before even looking at the car.
Of course he did.
So, but that turned into another project for him. He bondoed it up and he primered it and he was going to get it repainted and that became a whole thing. But he never, ever got it painted. It had this strip of primer going along the entire rear quarter panel and it's still on there. My brother or my uncle owns the car now. He got it when my father passed away. And so that accident has been haunting me for like 25 years or whenever that was back in 1992. I just want my uncle to get that car painted so I don't ever have to see that primer spot anymore. But yeah.
It's a horrible reminder, isn't it?
Just
it is a horrible reminder,
what color is it?
It's white. It's white with a black vinyl top. It did not have a black vinyl top, but he added that.
That's easy. Just go to a local body shop and say, hey, look, tell your uncle you're going to pay to have it done, and you can probably get it fixed for $1,000.
No. See, so, I mean, you of all people should be like, you don't just get that painted. You get the whole car painted. And then on those classic cars, they do the inside of the door and the floor and everything.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
a $30,000 thing. And my uncle was going to do it. It's probably less than $30,000, but it's above $20,000 for sure.
Our paint jobs start at $50,000.
Okay. So it's an expensive thing, and my uncle's going to get it done. He's just not ready to put that amount of money into it because if you put a $30,000 paint job on a car, it's mind blowing. The car is still only worth like $15,000,
right?
Or whatever. Like I cannot believe a 1967 Chevy Impala that is absolutely beautiful is only worth $15,000 or $20,000 or whatever it is.
Is it a 4-door?
It's a 2-door.
It's worth more than that.
Yeah. Well, there was the appraisal when my father passed away, and we distributed some of the bigger things to everybody. I think it came out to $15,000 in the appraisal. So I don't know.
That's just a running driving car.
Yeah.
Not one that somebody has restored. I think you're probably even if it's just the quarter panel that needs to be painted. Which John is a lot more familiar with this than I am. I'm thinking that's about half of what it's probably worth.
I was thinking, if it's a good restoration and that the appraiser, I do a lot of appraisals, David, probably deducted for that quarter panel, and probably undervalued it for the estate taxes, which I don't know if they would have applied to you. I don't know what the situation would have been. But, appraisal numbers can get fudged to benefit buyer, seller, insurance company, owner. So I would probably say that's probably a low to mid 20s car without seeing it. If it's running, driving, functional, and, 15 grand, 10 to 15 is going to buy you one that runs but is beat up in that. So it might be worth spending the $300 or $400 for your uncle and getting it reappraised so it's properly insured. And in my typical thing, if you go back 2 or 3 episodes, we do an interview with Adam Martin It's Adam Martin, Insuring Your Lifestyle. And ironically, Will and I went to college with this guy also. He used to be a vice president at Haggerty, and he now owns his own independent agency. But we had him on the show a couple of weeks ago to discuss collector car insurance and insuring collector cars and protecting yourself in that. And we didn't quite touch on that, what we just discussed, but I think there's a little, I think he can probably get a little bit better insurance on it, especially when you're going for, an insurance appraisal will be a lot more than an estate value appraisal. It's
right.
really
I didn't
funny,
even think about that.
But yeah, so I don't think I'd be insuring off that previous appraisal. But
I might have to have a conversation with Uncle Paul then.
But with what you said, though, I always have said in, my restoration career, and I go back to, mid 90s restoring cars and getting a paycheck for doing it. If you get 20 cents on the dollar for your restoration, so if you put $100,000 in and you get 20, you won the game. Very rarely will you see more than a 20 or 25% return on your money unless you're doing blue chip collectibles. It's, every restoration's 2,000 hours in a shop, and most shops are going to be $80 to $120 an hour. So split the middle, you got $200,000 into labor before you buy any parts to do a restoration. Doesn't matter if it's a Duesenberg or a 55 Chevy pickup. It's that much money. So that's the reality, which I'm sure you didn't want to know, but that's the reality of the situations. And you don't have to give Will $50,000 to paint a car. White's an easy color to match, and you might be able to do it without having to redo the car. Because your problem is if you repaint the entire car, all of a sudden the interior is going to look dated, the undercarriage is going to look dated, the engine compartment looks, and it's, then now we need to do this. You're better off just fixing the one area and getting it as good as it can be. And living and enjoying it. And that's what we always preach on this show is enjoy your car. Don't have it for an investment. Don't try to make money on it. If it puts a smile on your face every time you drive it, you've won the game.
That's
really.
Such a good attitude. Yeah.
And then you'll have money left over to buy a simulator. I don't know why I'd say that. And then you can drive anything you want, anywhere you want, anytime you want.
Exactly. Yeah.
And then when you wreck it, you just hit escape and you get a new car.
Yeah.
It's amazing how that works.
Request new car.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing how iRacing has that. They have that down, man. You bent it. I bent street stock. I've been to street stock last night to the point where it basically just ripped the whole front end off the car. And it was like, okay, cool. I'm still in the next heat. We're good to go.
Yeah. No, didn't cost me anything.
Yeah, it's an interesting reality, especially when you're in VR. Because sometimes in VR, it's like, that felt real.
Wait a minute.
I just got
simulation is not reality. It's simulation.
So
put one of these on your head.
I got
and then come back and talk to me.
It's still not reality.
It's not, but it feels insane, dude. When you bend a car in VR, it'll scare you. It really will.
I just got a VR headset for iRacing last week. And the first time I used it, after 10 minutes, it felt like I was drunk, and not a good drunk. Yeah. It was like an hour after that of like, I don't
Motion
feel
sick.
right. Yeah. And the second time was a little bit better. I haven't done the third time yet. It is so, when you're in it, it is really, really cool to turn your head left and right and to actually, it's a different experience. I'm hoping that every time I use it, I can race a little bit longer and use it because it's cool.
You have to do it
really
more
messes
often.
with my brain. Yeah.
You have to do it more often. When you start feeling that twinge of motion sick, stop immediately. Don't try to drive through it. You can't drive through it. It literally, once it starts messing with your inner ear, get out of that environment as quickly as you can, walk away and let things settle. But if you're already getting 10 minutes in the VR, chances are you're going to be fine. And it literally is building up a tolerance to it. It's just like anything else. It's you use it, you push up against that that window of, ooh, this isn't good, pull it off, walk away, feel better, come back, use it again, use it. Like I got that when I first started with VR, and now I can literally live in VR, man. The other night I was actually last night I was spotting for a friend of mine that is racing in the iRacing Road to Pro Gander Mountain Series. We were at the Charlotte Road Course, the Charlotte Roval. I was spotting in VR, standing up, and in chopper view. So we're literally like the chopper is following Kyle around the road course.
Yeah.
I'm floating above the car in VR, and it's amazing. Like it's just an amazing experience. And then you turn around and you can see 360 degrees in 1-to-1 scale, but you typically when you first get into VR, you've got to build your legs underneath you, man. Like if you tried that right now, I can almost guarantee that there would be a very, very sick David. I mean, it's you got to build your seat time.
All right.
But once you get it, man, the only thing that really gets me now is if I am behind the wheel in VR and I loop it and I start going backwards while I'm driving, because you spin the car around and you're still sitting here and your brain is saying that you should be backing up, but your visuals are different than it separates from your inner ear and your brain, and that doesn't make you happy.
It's got to be that feeling when you're sitting in a parking lot and you have your foot on the brake and the car left or right of you starts backing up, but you think you are moving. It's probably one of those.
It's that times 1,000. Like,
okay.
It gets me so fast. I go from 0 to, I mean, it happens so quickly, man. But
don't loop it.
Well, you got to push up against that 10/10 every once in a while. If you don't push up against it, you don't know where it is. You got to loop it every once in a while, Will.
I loop my go-kart about every lap.
There you go. If you're autocrossing and you don't ever hit a cone, you're not trying hard enough. That's how that goes. It's like everybody that I used to know when I was racing motocross, we'd have people come out all the time. I haven't wrecked in 4 years. You're not going fast enough.
You're not doing something right.
You're not trying.
Well, I'm going to be the party pooper like I always am. I hope I've had a great conversation with you, David. If you notice on Sean's kind of left there where my mouse is, he's got a picture of my studio behind him. That's a Wood Whisperer mouse pad. So that goes back to your Mark Spagnolo reference.
Ah, nice.
But I was just going to say, we've been going at it for probably about an hour 10 now. We only asked you for an hour and try to be respectful of time. I'm going to say thanks for coming on the show. I hope it was a good experience for you. It gave you an outlet to kind of really let the go-karting loose. And, I don't know if you feel comfortable doing it on your other media platforms yet, but it's, been good to have you. If you have any other questions, feel free to ask. We're here until we fall asleep,
but thank you. It was good to talk about something other than woodworking for a change. So it was great. Like, I'm totally new to this, and so I have that bug. I'm super excited, and so thank you for having me.
When you get into chassis manufacturing and you want to do a podcast on it, you can give us a call. I'm sure one of us will call.
It's inevitable. You might as well go ahead and just embrace it. You're walking that path, man. And if you want, add me on iRacing. Add me in your My Races on iRacing, and
all right.
We'll hook up. And if you've got any karting questions going forward, if I don't have the answer, I know folks that do.
All right. I'm in Class D, but I don't deserve to be there. I will.
Dude, I have a personal account, and I have our Nemesis Lab account, which is our commercial. We can use it at trade shows type thing.
Mm-hmm.
Our Nemesis Lab account's all rookie because I've never taken the time to build it up, man. I literally, like, if I'm racing in iRacing, it's either in a special event on my personal account, like 24 Hours of Le Mans or something like that with the teams that I race with, or I run hosted stuff. I literally, like, I don't have the time rising through the iRacing ranks and leveling up and getting your I rating up, that's a full-time gig, man.
It really is.
It really is. And I just don't have the time to do it. I totally understand where you're coming from, but you do want to get out of D into C as quickly as you can. And then that opens up a lot more dirt opportunities for you. So if there's anything we can do, like John said, if there's anything I can do to help you out when it comes to the racing side of it, and the iRacing side of it, just let us know.
Definitely. You bet. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. No problem at all. No problem at all. Anyone that I can actually hook into racing deeper, I'll do that.
Just what I need, a 15th and 16th hobby.
I am an enabler.
Sean's got many years of driver instruction with Porsche, Aston Martin, Dodge SRT, and all of that. So he's when it comes to racing, he is an enabler.
I've only done a couple Aston programs, but the Porsche and the SRT stuff and the FCA stuff, that was years of my life. So let me know how I can help.
All right.
And,
thank you guys.
Let me know how I can help, and then let me know when I can come drive some cool stuff. I'll do that. Because I am the guy that literally all I want to do is drive and teach people how to drive faster and learn how to drive faster myself. Like I have enough mechanical aptitude to fix stuff that breaks, but I don't want to be the guy that builds the whole car. I want to be the guy that helps to make the car better. And I get more pleasure from being behind the wheel than I do turning the wrench, which I don't think the other three people on this podcast right now, I don't necessarily think that you guys fall in that category. I'm weird. I'm driving.
I want to be behind the wheel too. I want to build it and drive it.
Well, yeah.
I was driving a 640 drag car when I was 17 years old. Yeah, I want to go fast.
Yeah, but you get a lot more pleasure out of turning the wrench than I do. Like
I'm sorry you feel that way.
Do you not?
Well, to me, I consider that the lazy man's way.
It is.
You don't want to build it. You just want to go enjoy it.
You're damn right. I want to pound on it.
I
am right there with you.
You want to break somebody else's hard work.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
I do.
And you're not going to be there to help them fix it.
No, I will totally be there to help them fix it. That is wrong. That is wrong.
You're going to be the wrench guy. Hey, hand me a wrench.
If that's what needs to
get me a beer.
I don't mind doing that at all. I'm not the first guy under the car, and I'm not the guy that you want like setting gear lash. I don't know enough about that aspect, but I do know about chassis dynamics and aero balance and corner weighting a car and those things. Sure, I'll jump in and I'll go to town on, but you don't want me setting up your rear end. That would be a bad thing. Unless you want your 488 amazing Detroit locker or whatever X-Track.
Okay, I'm going to say we get the feeling Sean doesn't like wrenching on cars.
No,
but thank you again, David. I'm going to.
I was supposed to have my first race on Sunday the 3rd, and then we had this podcast on the 6th, and I was really hoping like I could tell you about the first race of the season, and we could talk about that, but things are weird right now, and hopefully in June we can actually start racing. So
maybe I'll shoot you an email in June, and we'll have you on to tell us about that first race.
All right. It's funny. Man, I just bought scales. And like scales cost just as much as the used cart package that I bought. Like it's insane, but I know it's going to really help me with understanding what setup is doing and comparing A and B before and after the race.
Have you read the book Chassis Dynamics by Herb Adams? You do.
I thought I was going to pull it up. Oh, no, I have not read that book. No.
Say that's one of the best race car chassis engineering books to read. Herb passed away a few years ago, so it's some dated information, but that's kind of a Bible for setting up cars.
But the science doesn't change, though, right?
Nope.
No. Technology changes, but the science definitely doesn't.
Yeah. Physics has a way of being stubborn.
And from a driver's side, get everything that Ross Bentley has ever published.
Say that again?
Get everything that Ross Bentley.
Okay.
Speed Secrets. He's a lot of his stuff is tailored to open wheel aero dependent, but even at that, it's kind of the same thing that what John was just saying. Even though it's tailored to open wheel and aero dependent stuff, especially a lot of his early stuff, because he was an IndyCar guy, but it still relates to whatever you're doing behind the wheel, whatever you're doing, in whatever vehicle that you happen to be racing. It's very relatable, and Ross is an absolute institution when it comes to driver development, driver training, and just the way that he puts things and the way he illustrates things, next level stuff.
All right. I have that bookmarked. John, what was the chassis book that you recommended?
I think it's called Chassis Engineering or Chassis Dynamics, but Herb Adams is put chassis Herb Adams, and that'll come up for you, I believe.
Got it. Thank you. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks again.
Thanks
Maybe
for
we'll
coming on,
talk to you in a month or two.
Yeah, we'll do it. We should do a follow-up at it, mid-season or after season, and just to see what I've learned. Because I know, like, in the one competitive race that I was at, all I was doing was fighting the cart, and I wasn't understanding what it was telling me. Where the other drivers would be like, "Well, is it pushing in the entry? Is it doing this in the exit?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" All I know is, like, I am super sore and out of breath just from trying to drive the thing. So I'm going to have a better understanding.
This will be the training season, and you'll start to,
Yeah.
once you get a good car under you, they drive themselves, and then
that's what my family is telling me. It's supposed to drive itself. It's supposed to be effortless. So
it's not supposed to be really difficult to go fast, and if it is difficult to go fast, you've got setup work to do.
Yeah.
And it's, and the other side of it is seat time.
That's what everybody tells me. Yep.
Yeah.
I could read all the books that I want, but it's actual seat time.
And don't forget to get your eyes up and look way out in front of the cart where you want the cart to go, not where the cart is.
That's one of the things I've actually learned from my racing. Is like, Don't look where you're at, look where you want to be.
I think we had Randy Popst on a couple of episodes ago, and also he's a world famous racer, all kinds of stuff. And that's one of the key things. I think I even pulled it out for a clip, look where you want to go, look where you're going. So if you go back and listen to one of our episodes, that might be a good one to give some driver tips.
Hey, who was the guy that we interviewed that has the Indy cars? Is that Russ?
Has the Indy cars? We did,
or the old F1 cars, the Ferrari F1 car.
Oh, that's Bud Moeller.
Bud, dude, you need to hear this dude. You need to go back and listen to that podcast with Bud.
Bud what?
Moeller, Moller.
Okay.
I'm
super into F1, so that episode might hit home for me.
He's an investment banker. Lives in Virginia, and he owned Rubens Barrichello's like 2001, 2002 F1 car. He's got a 78 Ferrari F1 car. He sold Rubens's car now, and he's looking for something else. He hasn't replaced it, but he's 60 years old, and he holds the lap record at like 5 tracks in that F1 car. And I mean, he's got a neck that looks like most football players and that, but he's an interesting fellow also.
He was telling a story, and my mind just got blown of, I don't know what racetrack they were at, but it was a long straightaway, and it had like a hairpin at the end of it. And he was like, "Yeah, I've braked so hard right there that the sweat and tears hit the inside of my helmet." And I was like, wow.
That's 5 plus.
I thought I've been in a car with good brakes.
Yeah.
No.
5
That's
plus.
why the F1 racers have those huge necks, all those crazy G forces.
Oh yeah. So that's a pretty good. That was a pretty good podcast there on that with Russ.
I will check that out.
I can't even imagine what that feels like. 5 G's of braking load. Like, it would literally turn me to spaghetti instantly.
Oh yeah.
Like, I'd hit the brakes one time and be like, yeah, I think I'm done. I'm done. I think we could go back into the pits and hang out for a little while.
Think of the balls it takes to be going that fast and hit the brakes that hard before you have to turn right or hit a wall. Those are balls.
It's just a wall.
Yeah, and you're in an F1 car with nothing around you.
Yeah. Are you sure you don't want to stay on the show for another 2-3 hours, David? I mean,
you're not in some little carbon fiber simulator.
What are you trying to say?
I love busting your nuts, but
I know it's fun.
So.
If I may walk away from what one suggestion for your listeners and for you guys, if you have Amazon Prime, there's a 30-minute episode on there, and it's called F1 Racing Science, and it is the episode that got me into F1 racing because all of the teams make their own cars, like down to the bolt. The engines are purchased from whoever they're racing for. The clutches are purchased, but the bodies, the bolts, everything else they make in-house. It's like a maker's fantasy. So it is crazy the amount of science and technology that goes into an F1 car.
Oh yeah, I'll watch that.
Yeah, they're a little insane with their budgets and stuff, but
they're trying to put bigger caps on it to make it more competitive in the future. So hopefully they do.
I like watching F1 just because I like to see the new rule set for what are the changes that are going to be made for the following season, and then try to guess how much faster the engineers are going to figure out how to make the cars when the rule set mandates 15% less downforce and 20% less tire width and 42% less wing surface, and they do all this stuff in the rules to try to slow them down, and then the engineers are like, the engineers are like, no,
so much
we got this.
That they even have rules on how much time they can spend in the wind tunnels.
Yep.
It doesn't matter though.
It's crazy.
They limit them in the wind tunnels, and then they break out the FEA software, and they literally spend all the extra time.
How long have you been into F1 racing, David?
Only a year. A year. But I'm so I bought the F1 TV package so I can go back and watch all the old races, and I have.
Try and remember, was it 2010 or 2012 when Team Lotus became Caterham, and they tried to cheat the rules by running? They didn't have a last year's car or something. Oh, this is what happened. I remember because we had one at the museum. Lotus they started their team in like 2010, and they decided they would create, and this is in Danny Behar, and he's a crazy CEO, spent way too much money. They would create a road-going F1 or a customer F1 car. It was 680 horsepower as opposed to 1,000 horsepower or 900 horsepower like the full cars. But they were not Formula One cars, but they were built almost aero spec and body spec. They called them the T125 and sold them to customers. They only built like 6 of them or so. And the reason they created that whole program is they could do all this testing unregulated for their actual Formula One car. That's just, one of those little, and that's a thing with Lotus. If you really, really got into it, Colin Chapman, who founded the company and passed away in 1983, and that was one of the famous people that always said, and it's kind of the common rule in racing now, the rules just tell you what you can't do. They don't tell you what you can. So, but we'll leave on that. We've already went 15 minutes longer than my first goodbye. So
thank you guys.
Okay. Thanks, Dave.
See you, David.
Thanks for coming out.
Appreciate it. Thank you.